Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, NASA loses the keys to the International Space Station, Microsoft can't figure out what day it is, and I laugh myself to tears over the lack of security at Stratfor. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 47 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We streamed this episode live on March 1st and released it for download on March 2nd, 2012. This episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com, and I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. The live stream is powered by ScaleEngine.com, which is awesome. My name is Chris, and joining us like every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hey, man. Welcome to episode 47. We got a good show, too. Last week, we had a few news stories we could kind of cherry pick. This week, it was a bonanza out there. I mean,
yeah, it was like the
security world was on fire this week.
Have to be demoted down to the roundup, but then it's like, oh, there's kind of too much here, so the one story got promoted back up out of the roundup.
It's funny. It's like this week there was these interesting breaches, these interesting leaks, government policies that are kind of freaking me out. All kind of just came to a head this week. So it's going to be a good show, Alan. And I thought maybe before we got rolling to the news, I'd let people know about a new Chrome extension we have for Jupiter Broadcasting. So a lot of you are probably familiar. If you go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and scroll all the way down to the very, very bottom, we have these links that you can use before you shop, and they give us a little portion of your purchase for like Amazon, US and UK, Newegg, ThinkGeek, Best Buy, Mint.com. Even though Mint's free, they still give us a kickback. Audible, one of my absolute favorites. But right now, we also have the Chrome extension that will automatically make it so whenever you shop at one of the aforementioned sites, it'll automatically swap out the URL to a Jupiter Broadcasting affiliate URL, so you don't even have to think about it. And I want to say thanks to Rikai and Scooter in the IRC chat room who worked on that. Cool. So you just, if you're in Chrome, just go over there and click that. It'll automatically download and ask you if you want to install it. You say yes, and then you just set it and forget it. And you're supporting Jupiter Broadcasting with your shopping. And, you know, that really does help. We've made almost $500 this month off of people doing their Amazon shopping through those links. And that'll be, you know, I mean, there's no way I can pay my mortgage with just that. And I mean, I can't even really pay any of my major car bills with that. But it definitely will help with things like production costs and power costs and, you know, just the small things, even just food from time to time. So thank you, everyone who does that, because it helps me do Jupiter Broadcasting full time so we can do all these great shows that we do. And again, you just find that over at the bottom of jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right, Alan. Well, I think I've lollygagged enough. We've got a lot of news this week. Do you want to just jump right into our first story?
Sure.
All right, so this one's interesting. It almost seems like it'd be taken right out of a page from SciByte, but unfortunately, it's NASA, and they've qualified to make it into TechSNAP. It's about a stolen laptop and sort of the repercussions of all kinds of breaches they've had recently, isn't it? I'll let you set it up, Alan. Go ahead.
So basically, NASA had a laptop stolen, and that laptop contained the way they termed it, the algorithms for controlling the International Space Station. Now, it wasn't very clear whether, you know, it's the keys for an encryption system or if it's just like the protocol, like if it was just...
Whoa, now that's a headline. Or laptop stolen. Now they can control the International Space Station.
Well, it doesn't say whether somebody could actually just use the laptop and control the space station, but it has at least some amount of information about how to do it with, like, apparently the protocol or the algorithm.
Okay.
But, you know, it's like, hopefully they have strong authentication and some encryption and stuff on it. But obviously, importantly, they don't have encryption on all their laptops.
Oh, yeah.
And especially ones like this for command and control should have encryption, whole disk encryption.
Yeah.
You know, something proper, like Gelly or something.
Man. And, did they go into detail about how the laptop was stolen? Did they say, like, was it left in a car? Or?
Not really.
Okay.
But basically, it came out as part of a report by the Office of the Inspector General about IT security problems at NASA. So apparently, in 2010 and 2011, NASA reported a total of 5,408 computer security incidents, which is a lot. But some of those range from just, you know, some malware got on a computer.
Okay.
For example, one botnet that got busted not that long ago infected 4 million people or 4 million computers worldwide. including like 500,000 of them in the U.S.
Some of them were NASA.
Of those 500,000, about 130 were at NASA.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Right, 130. That's a pretty good chunk of machines, really.
Well, it depends how many machines they have, I guess.
Still, though, I mean, 130 machines got infected. That must mean that at least 130 machines weren't following proper security precautions or something.
Well, it was most likely a user doing something, but it doesn't say. This malware wasn't actually targeting NASA and it was just regular, mass malware. Not that big of a deal, but some of these incidents were more specific. So basically, of all those incidents, 47 of those were identified as advanced persistent threat attacks. Meaning, well thought out, resource,
ongoing,
serious, continuous.
Usually that's also doublespeak for they hacked us for a long time and continue to have access, and we didn't notice until it was quite a while afterwards, and we're a little embarrassed. But we give it this fancy name, so it sounds really sophisticated.
Yeah.
That's usually how I read that.
Yeah. And of the 47 advanced persistent threats, 13 of them were successful and compromised the agency's computer systems. So across that 2-year period, 13 successful advanced persistent threat attacks with, some fairly wide-ranging repercussions.
Wow. So, what the heck, NASA?
Yeah. So in an example of that, attackers based with Chinese-based IP addresses managed to gain full access to a number of key systems at JPL, with the Jet Propulsion Lab.
Yeah, JPL, right?
Yeah, it's popular and big and fancy.
Yeah.
But basically, they gain the ability to basically full control over the system. So modify, copy, or delete sensitive files, add, modify, or delete user accounts. Great. Once you hack in, great way to not get noticed. Add yourself a user that sounds legitimate. Like, look at the usernaming scheme, Bob Smith.
Or if you get the right access level, just reactivate a disabled account's always a good one. Or just change a password on an account that hasn't logged in for a long time. Exactly. And start using that.
Account, they could have uploaded hacking tools like rootkits or keyloggers.
Now, you said could have, so they don't actually know?
Yeah. Basically, they gained enough access to be able to do these things, but it doesn't go into much detail. But if you upload a keylogger or a rootkit, you could steal user credentials from legitimate users. And with that, if one or more of those users, they most likely do have access to other systems, then now that you have the user's username and password from the keylogger, you can then compromise other systems.
Right.
Outside of JPL.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you have like a Windows domain or any kind of single sign-on, that means that the username from over here, if the person has the right access level or is in the right group, will have access over here.
That's the beauty, right, of the Windows domain architecture is once you're logged in across the whole domain. You got access to anything that account has domain-wide.
Right, but if the systems are locked down properly, then every account won't have access to everything.
Right.
But if you compromise, if you sit there long enough capturing passwords, eventually you'll get the password of someone who does have access to the thing you're looking for.
I thought it was interesting that NASA claims that they have somehow tallied up the amount of costs they have incurred due to these attacks, and they've registered somewhere in the 7 million ballpark. And they don't really mention how they get to that number, but $7 million for a budget-tight NASA is probably not insignificant.
Right, but according to something earlier in the PDF, they spent $1.5 billion on IT infrastructure in that period.
Wow. Yeah, here it is right here. So you have, by the way, Alan has the report from the, who was it again that gave
the Inspector General.
Yeah, the Inspector General. You've got a link to this PDF report. Yeah, NASA spends more than $1.5 billion annually on its IT-related activities, including approximately $58 million for IT security. Huh. How could they spend $58 million on IT security and still have so many issues?
Well, if they're, if their budget is $1.5 billion and they're spending only, 3.8% of that on security, that probably means they're not spending very much at all.
He goes on to say NASA is a regular target of cyber attacks, both because of the large size of its network and because those networks contain information highly sought after by criminals attempting to steal technical data or compromise NASA networks to further other criminal activities. Really?
Less that and more, for example, other countries want to know about the rockets and the control systems and
Oh, I'll buy that.
A lot of all the latest technology comes out of NASA, right? That's where, especially in the 70s, was where all the cool
and like you said, it looked like it was Chinese IP addresses that were hacking them, Alan. So it must be them China trying to steal our intellectual properties.
A lot of other countries are trying to get, into the space race, right?
China. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even Japan, although they're more cooperative.
They don't hack our NASA as much.
No, they're friendly, and NASA just gives them stuff.
Yeah, no, I swear to God, every story that we have these days to me sounds like the government trumping up small incidents to make them sound more important, so that way they can justify massive expenditures on locking down the internet. I just saw an article today. I think it was over on CNET. That was about talked about how somebody from the Department of Defense said that maybe the government needs to get into manufacturing their own internet equipment because the consumer grade stuff all around the internet can't be trusted, and so the federal government needs to replace parts of the internet architecture with devices that they've created. It just sounds like a nightmare.
Yes, because I want to replace the Netgear stuff in my house with U.S. government stuff. How about not?
I don't doubt that these intrusions are happening, and especially, seeing how poor security practices these people have. But I'm so worried about this mountain out of a molehill. Because some of these things are a little vague in here. They say there was these persistent attacks, and they could have loaded keyloggers, and they could have loaded Trojans, but they don't actually say if they did or not.
They do talk about incidents where they made off with personally identifiable information about people.
Okay.
But more importantly, attacks that resulted in the disclosure of sensitive export-controlled data. So this is data that's not allowed to leave the USA, and it managed to leave when it was stolen. But also third-party intellectual property. For example, NASA probably works with some defense contractors using some of their technology, right? They license technologies other people have invented for use in the space station and so on.
Sure.
And, part of their agreement is that they're not allowed to give away that patented information. But when it gets hacked and stolen, that's, not good.
Right. No, absolutely. I have no doubt that they're causing an attack.
The news story I was talking about that I thought was the one you read I was reading the U.S. and China mutually assured destruction in cyber war.
Oh, that's not.
They both think that they can do enough damage to the other side that neither side wants to get involved in it.
Well, good. I guess it's sort of like a nuclear arms standstill too, I suppose, in a sense.
Sure, it's like, or you could just take all those SCADA systems and unplug them from the internet, and then
problem solved.
Be safe.
Mm-hmm. I know,
to some degree, not completely, but
right.
Yeah. And so in the show notes, we got the full PDF, which talks about a lot. Although, like you said, it's vague in a bunch of places. A lot of, you see that they spent, $50-60 million on IT security, but a lot of that seems to be, pay some contractor to come in and write a report that says you should monitor stuff more.
Right. And
or you should be proactively monitoring security.
Right. And they also said, I think they also recommend
manage that with all these computers.
Right. Yeah. Apparently, he was also trying to push NASA-wide encryption, where every computer,
every laptop should have an encrypted hard drive, which is for sure. Now, in a couple of places, it might be an issue. If the laptop is used for recording scientific data, the write speed might not be fast enough.
Yeah, right? Totally.
You can't write the data out fast enough to capture
absolutely. That could be a problem. Yeah.
Although, if you're doing that, a laptop's probably not the best platform because the disk is going to be slow anyway.
Yeah.
So NASA apparently was being slow in deploying encryption on all their hard drives to prevent stolen laptops from being able to disclose information nearly as easily.
Well, we've seen a few stories recently about NASA. I mean, that PDF claims they've had 5,000 different breaches over a certain period of time.
Now, some of those are non-consequential, like a little bit of malware got on a computer because some intern was browsing something they shouldn't have been or whatever.
Still a pretty significant number. It definitely underscores there's some sort of IT management that is being mismanaged.
Yeah,
I guess is the way to put it.
And, the Auditor General made 60 or 70 odd recommendations, although a lot of them are so vague that I'm not sure. You could basically, two different people could look at the recommendation and what NASA did to follow the recommendation, and one of them would say that they've met the recommendation, and some of them would say that they didn't. right? It's like, you should proactively monitor the security. It's like, all right, well, we installed an IDS. It's like, all right, but it's like,
yeah.
Is that enough or not?
I guess back to my tinfoil hat conspiracy. If you were going to try to scare other government agencies and the public into buying into the fact that the federal government needs to lock down on the internet more because the private sector is inundated by attacks and they're inundated by attacks, wouldn't you poke a division like NASA instead of like, I don't know, the Defense Department or one of the more critical agencies? Whereas NASA's still really important, they still have secrets, but it's not like it's a WikiLeaks scale kind of catastrophe.
I think if you were trying to play up the cyber warfare part of it, the attacks on RSA and like Lockheed Martin and so on make more for that.
Yeah.
NASA, half of NASA's main problem is teenagers in Romania. So
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, if that's what it is, then that'd be actually easier to
in
go
the PDF
squash.
file, they talk about a bunch of the arrests that resulted from attempts against NASA.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like,
I'll go
blah,
check
blah,
that
blah,
out.
Romanian teenager, blah, 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 Romanian teenager.
Oh, I'm going to check that out. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's in the PDF file. A couple pages in.
All right. Well, let's talk about Microsoft. What do you say? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So Microsoft is, of course, trying to make a transition from the on your desktop and in your server room rack kind of traditional model that might be starting to slow down, and they're trying to move out into the cloud. So they've built the Windows Azure platform, which, of course, is their new sort of competitor to what a lot of the other guys are out there doing. Right. So they got a bit of egg on their face.
The Amazon EC2 and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But this week, they kind of had a bumpy week, didn't they, Alan?
Yes.
What happened?
So basically, the Microsoft Azure cloud was down for most of the day on February 29th.
Ouch.
Like the service management system was down for over 9 hours. The data sync service was down for 19 hours.
Oh!
And there's all kinds of problems. And suspiciously, most of the problems seem to have started around February 29th at 0800 UTC.
Huh. What do you suppose that means?
Well, that happens to mean that if you're at Microsoft headquarters, which is in Pacific time,
right,
which is minus 800,
right,
that is exactly 0000 on February 29th.
Ah. So they had like some sort of leap day. Yeah, they had some sort of leap day problem, didn't they? The Azure cloud wasn't leap day compatible.
So Microsoft says that the outage appears to have been caused by a leap year software bug.
Wow. Are you serious? I mean, really, guys? I mean, really? Have you not been writing software for like 30 years now, guys?
It's like, why is it even done that way?
Yeah, that's true. Huh?
It's like, I'm sure somewhere out there's a BSD's licensed library for converting time, like C time, into dates.
Well, now I wonder if
perfectly immune to leap years.
I wonder if Apple suffered any kind of outages and issues with their whole iCloud and iTunes system, because I believe part of their iCloud stuff runs on the Azure platform.
Really?
But yeah,
that's
I know.
Like weirdest thing I've ever heard.
No. See, the new Apple hates Google, and they work with Microsoft now.
Right.
But
for sure,
when EC2 goes down, even if it's just one half of EC2, you really notice. I mean,
Reddit,
like
not
a lot of
so
stuff
much anymore,
goes down.
But Reddit used to go down.
Pastebin, Pinboard, a lot of big stuff.
Netflix is like
Netflix, Instapaper. A lot of big stuff goes down. Yep. When the Azure went down, I didn't even notice until I saw the headline.
I didn't notice either. However, there were a number of things that did go down. The UK government's G-Cloud cloud store service.
It runs on Azure.
Yes.
Oh, man. Way to go there, government.
Yeah. On February 28th at 5:55 or 5:45 p.m. Microsoft Standard Time.
Right.
Windows Azure operations became aware of an issue impacting the compute service in a number of regions. Now, it's not clear. Now, so that's before the leap year would have started for them, or the leap day.
Oh, okay.
But if the regions they're talking about in Asia were on local time, it would have.
Yep.
So I'm not 100% sure about that.
I bet that's exactly what
happened.
happened.
It's a separate issue, either way. So, yeah, while the root cause analysis is still in progress, the issue appears to be due to a time calculation that was incorrect for the leap year. I'm still confused as how the time, even if they thought it was March 1st now, right?
Yeah.
Like not having a 29th and going to March 1st.
Yeah.
Unless they were going from the other way. So a text string says that it's February 29th and tries to convert it to C time and says there is no February 29th.
Right.
That could, you get a -1 as your time. So it's 23:59:59 on December 31st, 1969.
This is embarrassing. I mean,
very much so.
This is like they're trying to sell this as the like they're going to like IT shops and businesses and saying,
it's high availability. It won't go down as much as your data center.
The whole idea is that we replace a component, a large important component of your infrastructure, so you don't have to build that out. We build it out for you. You host with us, and if they're going down because of leap year mistakes, I mean, people are going to remember that. People are going to be like, that was the service that had that really bad outage because they just didn't think of something. Well, what the next thought in somebody's head is when you're comparing all these different options, the next thing somebody's going to say is, well, what's to say they didn't not think of something else?
Yeah.
The track record really counts in these things.
What's going to happen on daylight savings time? Oh, no.
What's going to happen on December 21st, 2012? They'll probably just shut down because the developers figured they didn't need to code beyond that anyways.
Yeah. Tech Week Europe has a bunch of coverage, including some specifics about the UK government outage. Slashdot has coverage from the original outage, and then their mocking of the root cause analysis. And PC World has an article about previous problems Microsoft has had with leap years. It caused a big failure with the Zune devices and the Zune service last time there was leap year. So I guess like 4 years ago.
That's salt in the wound. That's harsh.
So it's obviously Microsoft hasn't learned their lessons, and apparently, as a programmer, leap years are hard.
Yeah, apparently. You guys, leap years are hard.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on that story?
Chris puts me on the spot and makes me do time math on live TV all the time.
And you got to do it right there on the spot. And they had they were sitting down and they had time to think through it all. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a funny one. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Nope. That's about it.
All right. Well, this week, I kind of teased a little bit at the top of the show. We saw a pretty massive leak. Two big organizations work together. And some of you might remember there was the story we covered about Anonymous compromising Stratfor. I think we put it in like the roundup at one point, right, Alan? It wasn't like a main topic, right?
It became a main topic. We did almost an entire episode about it.
Well, so now we're looking at the other end of that whole event. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, well, so if you've watched that episode, now we're looking at the other end of this event where Anonymous teamed up with WikiLeaks to release not all of, but a lot of the emails they got their hands on. Alan, yes. What's some of the details on the story?
So WikiLeaks is starting to release. They'll do it slowly like they've done before.
Yeah.
The data that was stolen from Stratfor, which includes emails, correspondence, a bunch of intelligence data, customer lists. Apparently, there's some proof about payoffs to people and how Stratfor does money laundering to hide the payments they give to their informants.
Yeah, the emails expose a revolving door also that operates between the private intelligence companies and the United States government and diplomatic sources around the world. Apparently, Stratfor also had advanced knowledge of global political events in exchange for money. And all of that's being exposed by this.
When diplomats are behind closed doors negotiating something that's, for example, going to affect business stuff, people that were inside the meeting would sell the data to Stratfor, and Stratfor actually was teamed up with, I forget which U.S. investment firm, and was actually buying and selling stocks based on the news before it came out.
That
basically
is
insider trading, but from the outside, so that it's not technically insider trading.
Think about the kind of profits you could make if you knew that kind of advanced information for investments and all those kind. And also there are cases where if you look into large events that have happened in the world and you look at companies that are involved in those events and their market activity, there's sometimes a big uptick in the market activity for those companies. And you got to look at that data and you got to, somebody had advance notice,
Right. So, if all of a sudden that the U.S. is going to do so-and-so in the Gulf against Iran, that's going to send oil prices up.
Right. Or actually, for example, if you knew some terrorists were going to fly an airplane into some towers, you might all of a sudden sell all of your stock in American Airlines and make millions of dollars.
Yeah. And a bunch of things like that.
Yeah.
But yes, so basically they set up Stratfor. Apparently the information WikiLeaks has shows that Stratfor set up basically an outside investment setup. Now, although it's as far as it's made to look like it's a separate company, but they have emails from the CEO to the staff saying, no, it treat it as if it was part of the company. About them investing money based on the intelligence information they have sooner than everybody else.
Right. Man, this is embarrassing. This is super embarrassing to a lot of different...
Specifically reminded me of a fiction novel. Tom Clancy's novel, Teeth of the Tiger, is like it basically sounds like it was written about Stratfor, or that Stratfor was based on the book. I'm not sure which one came first.
Yeah.
But basically, in that book, when an ex-president is leaving office, he fills out a sheaf of blank pardons and sets up this off-the-books intelligence agency that goes around collecting information. It basically sits in a line between the NSA and the CIA, and which is a restricted zone so that nobody can listen in on the radio communications between the two. It's a direct microwave link.
This is a real thing, or is this in the book?
This is in the book.
Okay.
But the radio link that he's talking about in the restricted space is real.
Okay.
Anyway, so they buy up a building and set up an antenna between so they can listen in. Normally it's encrypted, but they have the keys because it's... Anyway.
Right.
Basically, they get the intelligence information and they use it to go and assassinate terrorists. But as their cover and to fund their murdering of terrorists, they trade on the stock market based on intelligence information.
That is just so evil.
Yeah.
I mean, making money on these events that sometimes results in deaths or, it's the lowest of the low. These people need to be rounded up and arrested.
Yeah. Well, and the more with this is the fact that, they're... If you remember, some members of Anonymous were disclaiming the attack, saying that Stratfor's media outlet, kind of like a newspaper, and that they're protected speech, right? That nobody should be hacking them and taking down their website because it's... But as we see from the WikiLeaks files, it's not like that. They're out there bribing people for information, and basically they're an intelligence agency, a private one. But
I guess there could be thousands of those types of agencies based on some of the Googling I was doing. It doesn't seem like they're the only one out there that...
Yes, no, there's a huge market in open source intelligence. And now the open source there means something different.
Right.
Than what you and I would normally talk about when we say open source.
I would say WikiLeaks is the version of open source intelligence where it might be a little more what people are used to.
Right, but I think the open source intelligence actually came before the concept of open source software.
Interesting.
It just means that it's public information. It's just about correlating it and bringing the information together. So that's what. So the information they bribe out of people isn't technically open source intelligence. Open source intelligence is the stuff you hear, press releases and stuff you hear on CNN, and just making the correlations between that and your private data and other things you know.
So what do you think? I mean, we have these hacktivist group now that's teamed up with WikiLeaks to distribute this information.
Well, WikiLeaks is set up specifically to distribute information from whistleblowers.
I'm just kind of curious. What is your take now at this point on WikiLeaks? I think, for example, when some of the first cables started to get leaked, and Julian Assange had the sex charges that were brought up against him and things like that. I mean, a lot of people in America were very anti-WikiLeaks, but now looking at it and seeing a lot of the things that they've exposed, my tune is it's a valuable tool for the citizens of the United States and all around the world to know what these officials that we elect are doing when they don't tell us, and so that way we can make proper election decisions. But I'm kind of curious what you think now.
Reading, going through the U.S. leaked cables and reading the notes that the U.S. wrote up for President Bush before he came to Canada to speak to our Prime Minister back in like 2006 and a bunch of the other times, or the U.S. Sending notes to their diplomats in Canada, being like, why on Canadian TV are Americans made out to be stupid? And they were like whining about it.
That's interesting.
Kind of interesting.
One of the ones I found eye-opening were back before we wanted to take out Gaddafi in Libya, we were actually trying to buddy up with him, and we sent McCain down there. And there was some really interesting advice on how to handle Gaddafi, because I guess he was pretty eccentric.
Very.
And so, it was a pretty funny tongue-in-cheek. And then McCain came back and documented his experience, and reading that, it's funny because sometimes reading these files, it's more crazy than fiction. It's you wouldn't believe it if it wasn't for the fact they are official documents from the government.
Exactly.
So
there's a lot of stuff like that.
The reason I brought up the question is because I'm curious what the TechSNAP audience thinks. My inclination is that they're probably, in terms of what they think of WikiLeaks, they probably think it's a good thing for the populace.
They're
but
a little bit more on the all information should be open kind of stand.
But I think you could make a reasonable case from time to time they could be damaging national security and placing people in risk. So I kind of want to get comments from the audience to see what they think.
Well, first of all, damaging whose national security?
Well, I'm just saying I think people make the case. I don't necessarily think that.
Right. Yes, but as a Canadian, I don't give two shits about American national security.
Right. No, it improves national security for pretty much all the other countries around the world, except for the ones where we drag down with us. So it's. I think this type of whistleblower thing is pretty important, and that's why newspapers have rights in the United States about not being censored, is so that this kind of information can come out. Yeah. Absolutely.
They have to maintain that disconnect where WikiLeaks is just protecting the identity of the discloser and publishing the data, and not actually going out and seeking specific data. Right? They're not the ones behind the hacking. That's an important distinction that they have to maintain.
Yeah.
Now, as part of these leaks from Stratfor had a lot of specific information about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Some of the information turns out that the U.S. government has had a sealed indictment against Assange ready to use for over a year.
Really?
Yeah.
What are they waiting for him just to cross the line one more time before they use it?
No. Right now, he's in the UK facing extradition, right, to Sweden. If he does get extradited, once he's in Sweden, they may send him to the US, and then he would be,
and then they just pull that
forever.
out. They got it ready to go.
Yes. And then they label him a terrorist and throw him in a cell somewhere, and we never hear from him again.
Oh, I wish you were kidding. So that's a pretty interesting story, and a great not great in terms of story epicness, the way it's ended. You know what I mean? Also, stay tuned.
Also, I found it hilarious that the sealed, embargoed press release about this got leaked.
Yeah, I know. Leaks are just they're crazy. But
that was the other thing. Actually, it was when WikiLeaks first started up. They in the data here from the global intelligence files, they have Stratfor being like, "This leaks thing is huge. How do we make money off of this? How do we get on the leaks gravy train?"
Oh my gosh! Do they actually use the term gravy train? Because that would be awesome. Yes!
It's right there in the press release.
These are the worst people in the world. I love it. it. These are the real bad guys, the real villains to our story of our lives.
Alan, Keith Olbermann's gone. Can we steal that now? Worst person in the world.
That's right. Well, this is a good tease for the roundup too, because we got at the end of the roundup, we got something that'll sort of tie in with this whole story event. Alan, any other thoughts on this story?
Lots, but that's about it.
I know, right? Seriously, I feel like we could go on all day about it because it's just fascinating. All right, well, why don't we take a quick pause here and say good morning to the fine folks over at GoDaddy.com who are supporting this week's episode of TechSNAP. And the good news is they are extending the .co offer where you can get a .co for $7.99 through the end of March. It was a February-only deal, but GoDaddy is rocking that all the way through the end of March if you use the code COFEB8. COFEB8. All one word. You get it for $7.99, which is a better deal than you can actually find it over at GoDaddy's website. You're not going to get that deal over there, in fact, because they were offering it for $12.99. It was originally like $17.99. You can get it for $7.99 if you want to use that bad boy. The other thing we have a code for, and this is a popular one, so I'm glad GoDaddy's bringing it back for the TechSNAP audience. If you use our code March8 when you check out, boom, free private registration, which I think Alan and I always recommend private registration.
Yeah. So if your domain isn't a business, it should have private registration.
Yes. And also,
if you're not actually selling something, pretty much,
right,
then it should be a private registration.
Also, if you're doing like a personal blog or you're just starting a podcast, something like that, go the private registration. That way you don't get a bad surprise. And you can get it now for free if you use our code. March 8. That's one word. But you know what? We list all the codes over in the TechSNAP show notes. So there's all sorts of other codes that'll save you deals and all kinds of things depending on what you're buying. So thank you to GoDaddy.com for their awesome support of TechSNAP, and of course also the Linux Action Show. They help bring these shows to you guys, and we much appreciate it. All right, Alan. Well, I think it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback, and this week our first question comes from Robert. Alan, are you ready for this one?
Yep.
All right, stick with me, everyone. Here we go. Robert writes, question on using multiple NAT routers. I understand that in a unified LAN, having multiple NAT segments will make things a little more difficult. My scenario is I'm trying to solve for a, air quotes here, foreign computer that often suffers from infections. I have a Cisco E3000 as my main gateway router, which is connected to a $30 Belkin router, which I use as the foreign router. And I heard this sort of setup, maybe from another podcast he mentions called Security Now, that allows for protecting your home network from machines with infections. So what he's essentially trying to do is isolate this machine that is a frequent problem causer for him. Let's say it's like a kid's machine that gets viruses or something like that. And so essentially his question is this a good practice? Can he isolate machines with another router, and is it going to cause any problems? What do you think, Alan?
Well, there are a number of problems and setbacks with using double NAT. I normally try to avoid it, but in this case, it is possible. So with his setup, what he's talking about is a Y network, right? So you'd have your Cisco E3000 here with your internet connection coming into it.
Right.
And then split out from that, you'd have your two different $30 routers.
Right.
And with their computers behind them.
Yeah.
So basically, you'd end up with two separate network segments with different like IP ranges and separate DHCP and everything.
Right.
And they would get natted out into that third subnet between the two routers and the Cisco, which would then get natted out onto your actual one single internet IP from your cable provider.
Yeah, okay.
So that means when you're connecting out, your IP gets translated from subnet A into an IP in subnet C, and then translated from that subnet into an internet IP. Which means two sets of state tables and twice the chance that one of them was going to screw up or time out or whatever.
Yeah.
But not that big a deal. Your bigger problem with that setup is when you want something to get in. If you need to port forward into, say you have a web server in the secure segment and you want to open up port 80, you'd have to open it up through the Cisco, the first router.
Right.
And then forward it to the external IP of the your secure router,
right,
and then forward that again to the actual subnet A IP of the machine that is a web server.
Well, and a web server is probably a more advanced scenario than what he's going for. But something like Skype just requires inbound ports.
Yes, you need to set up the inbound ports on Skype. Otherwise, you end up with a relay call, or even games. Now, a lot of apps now use what's called
Universal
plug and play.
Yeah.
Which is basically a protocol where the apps on your computer can tell your router, hey, I need this port opened up. And your router will open it up.
Right.
Which works great. The issue is that'll only open it up on the inside router.
Right. It can only go one.
It's only going to go one hop. So your Cisco's not going to have the port forwarded. And so it's not going to actually get any of the data through. Now, if in this setup, what you could do is, if on the Cisco, is put the secure router in the DMZ so that any traffic that comes in that isn't port forwarded goes to the internal NAT router, which then can make its port forwarding decisions whether to deny the traffic or to forward it through for Skype and so on. So now that means that if you set it up like that, that means that without an explicit port forward, nothing on the foreign or guest network is going to be able to get through like that. But that might be fine depending on your setup, right?
Yeah. Especially if you just want basic internet on that one really isolated machine. What about like a more...
That's definitely not the best way to set it up, though.
Yeah. Now, what about a more better practice? You have any ideas for...
Right. So when we had our office set up for NearSource IT, which is a company that owns Scale Engine, we had a single pfSense box that just had a whole bunch of network cards.
Yeah, that'd be a great way to do it.
One network card came in from the cable provider. Well, in this case, it was DSL, but anyway. So that got our public IP address and ran on the network. Then we had one network card that went out to our DMZ, which is where we had all our servers. And we actually, from our ISP, we had a subnet of IPs routed to us. So we had a bunch of static IPs.
Very handy.
And so those went to the machines in the DMZ, and they forwarded through to the machine on the WAN. Then we had another network card that was our LAN, and that's where, my machine and Stefan's machine and a bunch of those machines were. Then we had another network card that went out to a switch, and that switch had two separate VLANs. One was for, we subleased part of our office space to one of our customers, and they had a bunch of their machines, so those were locked down in one segment. And then we had an open Wi-Fi access point for visitors and our cell phones or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And actually, the guy down the hall used it every once in a while.
Of course, why not, right?
that was rate limited to prevent him from using all of our internet, but also was separated so that traffic would never get mixed in with our LAN traffic. So any traffic inside our LAN is secure.
I think you nailed it.
Most of that could have been done properly with one good switch.
Oh, okay, with some VLANs.
VLANs, instead of having to have separate network interfaces.
I suppose so, yeah.
But let's buy a $400 switch, or we could buy a bunch of $10 network cards.
Yeah, especially if you have an old PC laying around and you load pfSense on that. A lot of machines these days,
mix in it and you're good to go.
I mean, pfSense would be crazy easy to set up. It's really simple. A lot of machines these days already have a NIC built into the motherboard, so you've already got like your connections.
A lot of it, like gaming rigs, your old gaming rig probably has two built in.
Yeah, seriously.
And then, you can get a couple extra network cards for a couple dollars a piece.
So that would be because then if you wanted to down the road too, he could start establishing some rules between the two different segments.
To allow certain traffic, but also with pfSense, he could rate limit the internet on the guest network, so the infected PC couldn't hog all of his internet. Right?
Yeah, weight limit. Yeah,
and send stuff.
That's especially important if he really is having some sort of infection issue, because he might very likely have something that's...
If it's just your kids, you can do a bunch of stuff like rate limit them so that they can't keep YouTubing so much that you can't use the internet, or...
So it doesn't screw up your Tor session, right? Yeah. Yes. Or Stowe, yeah.
Or also, I know some people that have it set up so that their kid's subnet gets turned off at 10 p.m.
Oh, yeah, you could totally do that. There's all kinds of things. And you could do porn filtering. You could, that'd be the way. Dude, I'm going to do that. Are you kidding? I'm going to do that once my kid's browsing the web.
Yep.
Heck yeah. My only problem is my kid knows how to take my iPad and put it on the 3G network and bypass the local network restrictions that I have. Once I solve that problem, I'll just have to turn off the 3G, I guess. All right, Alan. Well, those are some good answers. Any other thoughts on that question?
So the real setup is a proper switch with VLANs. Allows you to create those two separate networks, and then if you have multiple public IPs, you could just have the two separate NATs going into the Cisco, and the Cisco not doing NAT. Right? So if you have two public IPs, you set it up that way.
Yeah.
But for him, the easiest solution is probably DMZ to the good network and not to the bad network. And then so if traffic gets out, once it gets natted out into that middle network between the three routers, it basically, unless it's on a forwarded port, won't be able to get through and affect his secure network. And that's probably what he's after, is keeping, the machines on his secure network from being infected by the machine on the guest or foreign.
And actually, pfSense has the ability to load clam AV, so you could actually even do some AV scanning on the inbound traffic. I really think that's the way to go. And we actually did an episode.
And you can install Squid as a proxy in there, and using that to and again, more filtering or blocking certain sites, or
just the caching benefits would speed things up too.
Yeah, but blocking certain sites, or when I taught the class on it, what they had to do was load the domain list from AdBlock, the browser plugin, and basically block those at the firewall level.
There you go. That's perfect. So we did an episode back during like our Ultimate Home Server series on pfSense, right?
Yep.
We covered it. So go check that out and get the info.
A couple of weeks ago, somebody asked a question about Squid for something. I forget. But I covered a bunch of bullet points about it.
Oh, you know what I wanted to say? We actually got a voicemail to TechSNAP. That was a pretty good question. I joed up, though. So, I used to have a Google Voice account that was chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And then I made that a Google Apps account. And I've lost access to that old Google Voice account. I can't even log into it.
It got renamed to something predictable. I forget. If you Google for like the Google Apps migration thing, it'll explain what happened.
That'd be awesome because I got voicemails there I can't get to. Yeah, I can't get to them. So we're not going to be able to play it in this week's episode.
Well, but that's the question about Puppet, right?
Yes, it was. It was the question about Puppet. You're right. Yeah.
Well, we'll cover that once I've played with it a bit more because I'm actually looking at deploying that for like 40 servers. So
we've gotten a few questions about Puppet in the comments too, so I think people will be looking forward to that.
Definitely made me want to look at it, especially since I've seen a couple of patches against it to make it work better on FreeBSD.
Cool.
It's just that I'm awfully busy and haven't got time to play with it yet.
Right, yeah, it's one of those things. All right, well, should we move on to
I was too busy configuring new servers that would have been easier if I had Puppet to set up Puppet so that it would be easier next time.
You'd have more time. No kidding, right? Isn't that always how it goes? Well, we do have a war story this week. It's a little bit shorter one, but it actually ties in really well with our first news story this week.
Yes, exactly.
So thanks again to the other Alan who works over in IBM in Ireland, and he sends in some of these great stories. So, Alan, without further ado, let's cover this week's war story.
So this is a war story with a difference, as it doesn't actually involve some crazy user doing some batshit insane thing.
Oh, okay.
With or to their computer.
Okay.
So it's just a call that came into the tech support agent where the user wanted a little bit of information about their ThinkPad laptop.
Sure,
so
that sounds innocent.
A couple of the questions went like this. What is the exact chemical composition of the battery in the ThinkPad 760 XD?
Are you serious?
That seems like an awfully specific question.
Yeah.
What is the recommended disposal procedure for said battery?
Okay, all right. Maybe they're environmental conscientious or something.
Yeah. Can you tell me what would happen to the battery if it ruptured in a vacuum?
Okay. All right. Ruptured in a vacuum. Is this NASA? Is this NASA buying a laptop?
Settle down. You're ruining the story.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm just wondering. My mind's running.
If the battery were to overheat, how volatile would the liquid effluence be? That means the gas. If it were to explode. So I doubt that the user could have even gotten the questions out and taken a breath before the agent put them on hold and ran for help. So the agent walks over to the second level support area rather than doing the call as procedure. So after a good 5 minutes of talking, nobody could really answer the questions because most people at the help desk don't know what would happen if the battery was ruptured in a vacuum.
Probably they haven't had a chance to test that one.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future.
So we couldn't figure out what part of the company you would direct somebody to get them to answer that question either. So as with all good tech support strategies, we decided on a two-pronged approach.
Okay.
The agent would go back on the line with the user and stall for time, while the rest of us frantically hunted down any possible source of information that might help answer the questions. So we told the agent to ask the user why they needed such detailed information.
Right, like this is a little weird, yeah.
If they had a very weak answer, to push them to call back in order to buy more time to get the answer.
I love they're going to judge how strong the answer was. Like, I got to remember that.
Like, why you wanted to, it's like, how,
You got to make a big case, got to make it good.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm just curious what happens when you rupture the battery in a vacuum. It's like, well, if you call back, we'll find out for you.
Could you tell me how this battery would operate in atmospheric conditions similar to Mars?
So some 20 minutes later, the agent came back on with the second level people with some interesting details on what was going on.
Okay.
It was all a misunderstanding. The user was supposed to call a specific private support number at IBM and not the regular public 800 number.
Oh, they got a fancier number they can call.
Our enterprising young agent did pull a fast one and offered to transfer the user to that number directly. The user provided the number, and the agent promptly connected the call, then hit mute and stayed on the line to see what the hell is going on.
Oh, sneaky.
I would have been curious too.
Me too. Totally, I would have been too. Yes. I would just want to know what the F. Even if I didn't know about the battery stuff, I just want to know what the F does that guy need to know for.
Keep in mind that they're Irish. So an American accent answers the phone.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't normally think of Americans as having an accent, right?
I guess, yeah.
Anyway, so the user responded and provided an account code upon request. So the tech on the private number acknowledged that the user was calling from NASA Black Hat Technologies subsidiary. So apparently the shuttle program had 4 of these laptops on each mission, 3 primaries and 3 redundant backups just in case.
And they're just now asking this question?
Well, I guess they bought them to put them on the shuttle.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay,
they were upgrading to the next one and they had to re-ask the question, whatever. So suddenly the tricky questions all made sense, and eavesdropping can kill curiosity can never be a bad thing, right?
So it was NASA. Well, when they asked in a vacuum, but
that one I didn't pick up on that right away when I was first reading this.
Were they taking the laptops outside the space shuttle?
Well, no, but even I hope
there's air inside the space shuttle. Right, that's all I'm saying.
If the space shuttle were to rupture because of an explosion or something,
then the laptop is the last thing I'm worried about.
Well, if the laptop's going to explode and spit acid on everybody,
and it float.
Would be bad.
Oh my gosh!
Well, because if the battery acid were to start a fire or were to burn through their airproof suits that keep them alive in a vacuum, that would be bad.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, because a spill in a gravity environment is one thing, but an explosion. Oh boy!
A chemical spill in low gravity.
In space.
Yeah. Somebody's asking. It was NASA Black Hawk Technologies, not Black Hat.
Oh, did you say Black Hat?
I didn't, but somebody in the chat room thought I did.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that was a great war story. Very interesting, and such a. It seems like such a mundane thing that NASA just has to follow up on, but they really have to cover every single detail, and it's fascinating. Yep. It's fascinating.
And again, it reminds me of the thing we were talking about the other week in the back of the manual for that server I bought. It's like, this should not be used for any life support systems, aircraft, space technology, so on and so on.
Right.
It's like, apparently IBM might not actually say that in their manual, that no, your IBM is perfectly good for using in space.
Well, now they can say ThinkPads have been space tested. So There you go. All right, Alan. Well, I want to encourage anybody to send in their questions or maybe their war story to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com. We've got a lot of years of experience in the IT field, and we'd be happy to help you guys out. So send those in, TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com, and I'll get the voicemail working again soon, too, so you can leave voicemails, because I'd love playing those on the show.
Yep.
All right. Then that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. These are the stories that didn't quite make it into the top of the show, but we still thought they were awesome and wanted you to go check out, maybe do a little further reading on your own. And they're almost always exclusively powered by our awesome subreddit at links.techsnap.tv. And you can go in there, you can submit your stories that you want to make it into the show, or, like we always appreciate, you can vote up on stories. We always need more people voting on the stories you want to see make it. We appreciate everybody who does that. All right, Alan, should we cover our first story in the roundup this week?
Sure.
All right, I'll take it. The first one is, welcome to Black March. Now, some of you might remember that I got on my soapbox kind of recently about SOPA and ACTA, and I kind of made the proclamation that the only way to really stop these companies and to stop their attempts at internet censorship, because it's not going away, is to actually boycott the companies themselves. Because really, you got to ask yourself, are those movies and are those TV shows worth giving up your freedoms on the internet? Well, a big group of people got together and they're launching Black March, which started today, and it's all about boycotting those companies and making a statement and costing them where it hurts the most in their pocketbooks. I'll tell you, I'm not as jazzed up about this because it doesn't feel like it has a molecule of the amount of support that the anti-SOPA stuff did. I still think it's good to go check up on this and actually give it some serious consideration. You might just ask yourself that if you don't need some of this stuff, maybe you could just boycott it for a little while. Go check out Black
The campaign is just to, delay your media purchases until after March, so that on their little graph for their financial statements, they say, hey, look, in March we had this giant drop of people that are unhappy with what we're doing. Yeah. Maybe we want to not piss these people off so much.
It would be great if it could register on their radar and they could actually look at that. All right, yeah. Alan, the next story takes us to the Vatican, and this one's yours.
Yes.
What happened here?
So there was an unsuccessful cyber attack against the Vatican launched by Anonymous, specifically some people from South America were protesting something the Pope was doing. Anyway, basically, they have a lot of... the article that I linked has a lot of insight into how the attack was set up and why it didn't work, and it kind of just walks through what happens, from the start to finish of an anonymous attack and how they're based. And a lot of it is about how, Anonymous is made up, it's this big boogeyman and it's this crazy group of people at the same time. And, like the article talks about, mostly you have a small group of quite talented security professional type people, and then swarms of regular people, right? Just internet trolls,
right? Yep.
And so, depending on the target and what happens, because of the nature of Anonymous, it's hard to say what's actually an organized operation, because technically everything that anybody does where they don't take credit for it is anonymous.
Right. And anonymous groups can be sort of established right on the go. In fact, one of the things they found out after analyzing the bits and pieces that were left behind from this attempted attack on the Vatican is they sort of have like a two-wave approach, at least for this one, and they're sort of theorizing maybe that's how they approach the other ones. Is first wave is their more sophisticated attackers try to come in and find something that they can really exploit. And then if it's something easy, they pass it off to another group, and that's when they kind of just call for arms and they just say, hey, on IRC and on Twitter, does anybody want to help us? And if they aren't successful at that, then they sort of fall back to a more crude denial of service attack where they can just sort of get anybody involved on that just needs to have some software on their machine. Yeah. So it's interesting. All right. Well, the next story.
The big group of people that aren't talented are just offering their machines as drones in a botnet.
Exactly.
But also, it seems that the attack on the Vatican didn't really involve any of the people that are actually really good with security. It was more that they had the middle level people that can use some scanning tools to look for common SQL vulnerabilities, and they didn't find any, and so they reverted to a denial of service attack. Whereas this isn't, this attack wasn't on the same scale or level of sophistication as the ones we've seen against like Sony or Stratfor.
It also helped that the Vatican's computers were from 1981. So, no, I'm kidding. All right, Alan. Well, the next story in the roundup's also about Anonymous, and it turns out that allegedly 25 people involved with Anonymous have been arrested in Spain as part of an Operation Unmask that was being led by Interpol. And it sounds like a group of them were in Spain, but another 10 or so were in Argentina. And so that makes it 25 in total. Interpol's website was also taken down by Anonymous in a denial of service attack briefly as sort of a response to this. So interesting. 25 in Spain and 10 in Argentina. And 25 of them. But they just keep coming, That's the thing about it. Is you can take one group down.
That might be this, partly the same set of people that were actually in the attack against the Vatican. It was Spanish. But
yeah.
I don't know if the two incidents are related or not.
Yeah, somebody's going to go after you. All right, Alan. Well, the next story in the roundup is yours about the EFF, HTTPS Everywhere, right?
Yes. So the EFF, they've had their HTTPS Everywhere plugin for a while, but they're launching version 2. And so what this does is on top of sending a copy of each SSL certificate that you observe to their database so that they can collect every SSL certificate on the internet to analyze them, it now has the ability to send feedback back to you. So when you see a certificate that the observatory thinks has a problem with it, it will now alert you. So if you remember when we saw these problems with the certificates from Komodo or DigiNotar and so on, we saw these were actively being used in by governments in Iran and so on to basically perform man-in-the-middle attacks on users. So if you're worried that might potentially happen to you, if you install this plugin from the EFF, it connects to them and will basically, when it sees a certificate that claims to be for Gmail, but is from not the same person as everybody else's certificate for Gmail, it'll be like, hey, that's probably fake. And so quite a useful plugin.
Well, the next story in the roundup is sort of a head shaker. So, of course, everybody's familiar with SOPA and all of the controversy around that. But apparently, SOPA isn't needed. The U.S., working with VeriSign, using a warrant for the state of Maryland, takes down a foreign website.
And that website was Canadian, by the way.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
I really had no more to cover than that. I just think, it's remarkable. It's remarkable that they made this huge think about SOPA and how it would be needed to take down foreign domains. And here we are. All they had to go was say, excuse me, VeriSign, here's a warrant for Maryland. Can you take this website down?
Yeah.
And VeriSign complied.
There's a couple things people might not be aware of. VeriSign is a company that sells SSL certificates, but they are also the company that runs the registry for .com and .net. So every domain registrar, whether it be GoDaddy or in this case, the domain registrar that the Canadians used was a Canadian one. They all get them through VeriSign.
Right.
So VeriSign's able to, it's not a reseller type thing. It's more they just host the registry.
So VeriSign's able to pull the rug out right from underneath that Canadian registrar.
Yes. So they basically modified their database in a way that they're not supposed to be allowed to do to take that .com away from the Canadian registrar and give it to the U.S. government.
And the reason why it's kind of a big deal is the precedent that's basically being set here is the United States thinks they own .com, .net, and .org. And they're just acting on that.
Specifically, the website that was targeted was, I think, Bodog or something. It's a gambling site. Now, that's completely legal in Canada. But the U.S. government found that, or the investigators at ICE or whoever did it, found that some people in Maryland may have used the website to gamble, and that's illegal in the USA. Rather than trying to prosecute the people that were gambling illegally on a site in Canada, which is legal in Canada, they decided to take away the website from the site in Canada.
Wow.
Which was breaking no Canadian laws.
How backwards is that? Meanwhile, Stratfor can take huge bits of impending information and sell it on the market like a commodity. But that's fine.
Or use it for, just to profit off the stock market.
But if I play poker and I make $5, they're going to take the site down. That's crazy. Yeah. All right, well, kind of along these same lines, the next story in the roundup comes from Eric Schmidt. He was at Mobile World Congress, and he said a UN treaty to control the internet would be a disaster for the internet. Alan, do you have any thoughts on this story?
So specifically, I think actually this treaty is about moving the .com registry away from VeriSign to the International Telecommunications Consortium.
Right.
Which is a UN organization that runs the telephone system.
Right.
And does such a great job of it. Honestly, probably not a great idea either.
Yeah. Eric Schmidt had a pretty great quote here. He said, "That would be a disaster. To some, the openness and interoperability is one of the greatest achievements of mankind in our lifetime. Yes. Do not give that up easily. You will regret it. You will hate it, because all of a sudden that freedom, all of that flexibility, you'll find you've shipped it away for one good reason or another after another." So he's essentially saying, we need to be vigilant of the fact that we keep coming up with these good little reasons to make these little adjustments here and there that are leading us down a path that we might not be able to recover from.
Yes.
And it's kind of a case I've been making recently. It's like the internet is this amazing platform.
To be left alone.
It's not like TV. It's not like radio. It's a completely new medium.
It's a packet exchange network. And when Vintage Surf invented TCP/IP, the entire point was that you can get a packet from anywhere to anywhere, and that's all it's supposed to do. It doesn't look at what's in the packet, doesn't care what's in the packet. It gets it from point A to point B through whatever intermediaries it has to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all the internet is, and that's all it should be, and nobody should be messing with it.
Hell, and Eric Schmidt agrees with you, so that's good. And so do I.
No, the problem is that even leaving it at VeriSign, they're messing with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we can't trust the U.S. government to run it, and we can't trust, and the UN is a government as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now ICANN has its own problems, but it seems to me that something more along the lines of a meritocracy, where you have something like the Internet Engineering Task Force or the IEEE, something more to that.
That makes sense.
Kind of concept.
That makes sense.
where people that actually know it, understand it, and don't have an agenda to control it or profit from it.
And can have some consensus among multiple stakeholders all around the world. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Alan. Well, are you ready for our next one? Last week, we introduced the TechSNAP Hall of Shame.
Huh? Hold on.
One. There's another story. Did I skip it? All right, you take it.
So a study from the Uptime Institute came out about the reasons for downtime at data centers.
Oh, yeah.
And they found that more than 50% of data center outages are caused by vendors, contractors, installers, and other non-data center staff. So data center staff were at fault apparently about 41% of the time, and about 8% turned out to be your regular things you might expect. But when you have vendors coming in to do work on their stuff, they can have unintended consequences. You have installers coming in. If you have an electrician coming in to install some extra circuits or whatever, and they mess something up, and cause problems.
Yeah.
And that actually harkens back to if you remember my war story, I think it was one of the very first ones I ever did on the show.
The power outage, right?
The phone or the fire alarm one.
Oh, yeah.
Contractor comes in to fix the air conditioner in the data center and starts soldering without telling us first.
Yep.
Sets off the alarm.
Yep.
If it had been another 2 or 3 seconds, would have caused the entire data center to go down when the UPS was overridden and the power was shut down to prevent the fire from spreading. Right? And that would have been a data center incident caused by an outside vendor.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I could say my personal experience kind of backs up this story too.
Yeah.
So,
at the same time, you expect a certain amount of finger pointing, right? The data center doesn't. They always want to say it wasn't our fault. It was this upstream or this vendor or this downstream.
Especially when there's something in the contract that states a certain amount of uptime. It's always good to be able to blame somebody else.
When you have a service level agreement that says 100% uptime, except for things not our fault.
Right.
But a lot of times it could be vendor. For example, the problem that we had with transit out of Germany a couple of weeks ago. The problem was the software on the switches, the core switches. The vendor's like, oh yes, there's a problem. Here's a patch firmware to use on that switch, or please roll back the upgrade you did, or I forget exactly what the solution was, but it was the vendor's fault. There was a problem with the switch that wasn't the data center's fault. It was the vendor.
Right. Yeah. All right. So what I was saying is last week we introduced the Hall of Shame, where over on our links.techsnap.tv Reddit, if you have a company that did something really boneheaded and you put it in brackets Hall of Shame in the title, that way we know. We might track it, and if a good one comes up that gets enough votes for that week, we'll include it in the show. And we're keeping a master list that at some point we'll probably review and have a good laugh at. So this week, we've got a new contender for the Hall of Shame. So it rolls right off our story about Anonymous and WikiLeaks tying up to cover some of that Stratfor information that came out. Here is the contender for this week. It is Stratfor itself, because if you go to the very bottom of this article, the real gem comes out. Are you ready for this? He says,
"See this."
Okay, great. All right, okay, great. He says, "This is the guy writing about the guy in the article getting interviewed talking about Stratfor's defenses." He says, "Apparently, it wasn't a very hard problem for these anonymous guys. The password was the company name, Stratfor. Stratfor, yeah, whatever. That was their password.
That's the name of a place.
These guys are.
No, it doesn't say what that password was for, but maybe just their CMS or whatever.
But that's like the initial password that got them in the door. I say that qualifies them for the Hall of Shame right there.
That is for
Not
sure.
only are they the scum of the earth kind of company selling these kind of critical bits of information for money, but they also suck at protection. And so that, to me, right there, nominates them for the TechSNAP Hall of Shame.
For sure.
So I want to say thanks. I noted down who submitted that one. Who that came from
Manwich 2000.
Manwich 2000 in the TechSNAP Reddit. Thank you for submitting this week's Hall of Shame. Now we may have one next week too if somebody submits one.
Apparently that was the SSH password for the root account.
No, shut up. No way. Oh my gosh.
Sure, but pro tip: no login as root over SSH ever. It's like FreeBSD comes at that turned on out of the box, right? No, root login is not allowed out of the box. Every Linux doesn't have that. I'm not entirely sure why, but yes, never, ever, ever allow root login over SSH. Even with the SSH key, just no, right? You should always have to log in as a regular user and then switch to root.
And
now,
okay,
in FreeBSD, there's the extra step where you have to be in the special group called Wheel, the GID0 group.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Before you can SU to root. So it's another layer of protection.
I literally have tears in my eyes. I mean, I cannot believe that these boneheads had SSH for root turned on and that they had their password.
That's the default. On every Linux, that's the default.
No, is it?
Yeah.
I guess. It depends. It depends because it's, I guess it's like, for example, on Ubuntu, it's not because there isn't a root account active. I literally have tears in my eyes. I was laughing so hard.
Well, sorry, no, it's on Linux, on Ubuntu, the issue is that the root account has no password and it's set so you can't log in if there's no password.
Right. That's just wow. That is just dumbfounding. That definitely qualifies them for the Hall of Shame, the TechSNAP Hall of Shame. All right, Alan. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
All right, everyone. Well, so TechSNAP is live on Thursday afternoons at 1 p.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv, or that is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
See that? Right there on the spot. You can also listen on the audio-only stream over at jblive.am. Maybe you're at work. Maybe you're commuting. There's some great streaming apps out there for your smartphone that tune that in and do a little buffering, and you can just drive right down the road and listen to TechSNAP live. So be sure to do that. And of course, you can always download it Friday mornings in just about any format you could possibly want, including RSS feeds that goes with those formats that lets you just totally set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about getting your weekly dose of TechSNAP. Your RSS client just downloads it automatically for you. All right, Alan. Well, thanks. Great show. Yep. And I want to say thanks to everyone for tuning into this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.